Hey, this is Dan Lehman from automationhelpers.com. And today we're going to talk about how we can have different units of measurement or be able to take any kind of single select values and have some kind of numeric value attached to them. So if you think about it, normally single select fields could be any arbitrary value and no real meaning behind it. But we have situations that come up where we want it to actually represent something that we can quantify. And by quantifying it, we can use these in calculations for things like formulas to be able to derive new values. One of the clients that I'm working with is a manufacturer, and it's really important for him to be able to understand, both from an inventory perspective, how much material he consumes. But he also uses that amount of material to apply some calculations to it to be able to price and quote out for his customers how much his projects are going to cost them. And so it's really important that he understands how much material is going out the door. Now, to do that, really there's different ways that he measures this in terms of unit of measurement, depending on the kind of product or the type of project that he's doing. In this case, I'm taking a look at something like an invoice line, but it could be an inventory line, and we've got it associated with a specific type of product that we have. And in this case, we're looking at these different measurements. We have each square inch, square foot. As you can imagine, these are different size shapes of squares and rectangles that have different dimensions to them. And yes, we can put in the description the square inches for that. So you might think, okay, well, why don't we just put the square inches in parentheses? Well, that's helpful from a visual standpoint, but we want to actually go a step further so that we can measure this behind the scenes. Now, in order to do so, we have to think about what's the lowest common denominator for this. And aside from each, all of these can be boiled down to a number of square inches. And so we can think of 1 square inch, and from here it gets to be more and more square inches. So let's go ahead and hop inside to assign some values for these. We'll go ahead and click on our single select field. This also would work for multi-select as well. We'll go ahead and modify the field settings. And as we modify the field settings, this feature is a little bit hidden, not intentionally, but just so it doesn't clutter up the UI. So if you haven't seen this before, there's a little button to be able to expand this. And when we expand it, here's where we get our additional options. So you've got an option to include values. That's what you want to make sure to have checked. And then these are just manually inputted. So it's not based off of a formula. There's no conditionality to it, which is why it's really a best practice when we can have all of these things be different numerical variations off of each other. So if we had, liters instead of feet, if we're starting to mix these, the quantity might not quite make sense. But because we're using a single unit of measurement as the underlying measurement, that's where we can say, okay, well, a foot is 12 inches by 12 inches. That's 144 that we have for the value. And each of these are calculated in the same manner as we get larger down the spectrum. Well, that's easy enough to be able to assign those values. Let's go ahead and X out of here. And now we actually want to see these in action. So we've got a unit of measurement, let's say a square foot, and then we have a quantity, and this is just a number that we can put in. And we want to understand the total material for this. So let's create a new formula field. And in the formula, let's go to the advanced editor. And you'll notice that we do advanced because even though we'd want to multiply out 2 fields, it doesn't recognize that single select automatically for its values. And we'll talk more about that in just a moment. We'll go to advanced editor here and use our quantity, and we'll multiply that by our unit of measurement. But it's throwing an error for us. And it says something like argument with type unit of measurement not allowed. Well, what does that mean? In this case, it's still trying to use those labels. And instead, we want to specifically tell it to grab those underlying values to use in this calculation instead. So in order to do that, we have a specific function that we can use, which is called numeric value. And if you click on it, it does exactly what you think it does. It grabs that numeric value from the single or multi-select field. So we can use this, and now we can insert that unit of measurement field inside of it. So we'll multiply that across. Let's give this a name like total material. We'll add the field. And now we've got our total material coming from our unit of measurement multiplying by the quantity. We can test this out, throw in a different quantity, and that's going to update the value. That's pretty cool. Now we can say, oh, you know what? I didn't mean a square foot. I actually meant we need a square yard, and that's going to update those values as well. So in this example, we talked a lot about units of measurement for this single select. I'm curious to hear in the comments how you're planning on using values with a single or multi-select to be able to do some magic with formulas that we have. If you have any questions about your SmartSuite implementation, feel free to reach out to us at automationhelpers.com, where we're offering a free 30-minute consultation.